welcome to our last speaker, Torben Hofmeister, please.
So I think we lost the schedule a little bit. I've got 10 minutes left, and actually I have a 10 minutes presentation, so actually that fits. So thank you, Anthony, for mentioning all the resources, so I can skip that part of my presentation. And I just jump into it. Well, first about why do we talk about, who's talking about the Arctic, why are we talking about the Arctic, and what are we talking about the Arctic? To underline the statements we got, or if people underline the statements, you have to see that in the context of an Arctic narrative. So there are two different narratives. The interregional, this belongs to the coastal states or the Arctic Council members. They have territory in the Arctic, and of course it's kind of national interest to focus on the Arctic. And there's the second part, this is why I stay here, and actually why the European Union keeps ourselves busy with that topic, is the extra-regional narrative. These are countries without, or stakeholders without territory in the Arctic. So far in the Arctic Council, these are the observers, 12 non-Arctic countries, 9 intergovernmental and interparliamentary organizations. And actually, the thing is, I'm a geographer too. I'm a geographer, and if you analyze this narrative, you see there's a spatially inconsistent. For the extra-regional narrative, one, they use the near Arctic location or the polar scientific expeditions as a reason why they are interested in the Arctic. And the second, this is why nearly everyone is interested in the Arctic, is the Arctic as a maritime global space where climate change has a potential ramification for the entire planet. So they're interested to prevent threats to the interest in shipping, science, trade, and environmental and societal hazards. And the second part to analyze the Arctic is the framing, the conflict framing. So this is more about the social construction of how societies organize, perceive, and communicate about the reality. So this framing involves social construction as a social phenomenon by mass media sources, political or social movements, political leaders, and other actors. For example, historical in Russia, the North hasn't been really if you are from the north, near the Arctic, you haven't been a Russian. Normally you have to be from St. Petersburg or Moscow to have the Russian background. But now it changed over the time. And this is kind of a framing, how you perceive or how you communicate reality. So it's very helpful if you analyze security issues to be aware of the narratives and the conflict framing. So you can deconstruct the setting and don't finger point at some nations or some actors or some stakeholders without knowing why they are doing what they do. So is the Arctic is there a new geopolitical prominence? Actually, no, there is not. In the First World War, the Arctic was the first large-scale use for military strategic purposes, for transport and supply chain, as a part of supply chain. In the Second World War, again, transportation the focus. And the peak of the geopolitical prominence was in the Cold War. Because of the combination between geography and technology, it was the shortest path for strategic missiles and bombers. In the 1990s, the Arctic marginalized in the new global geopolitics by emerging threats and crises like the Balkan, Afghanistan, international terrorism. So actually, back on the security discussion came back in the 2000s because of the new sailing routes and its rich resources. But the geopolitical significance in security and defense terms, it's much lower today than during the Cold War. So it's nothing new. So now I'm able to run over this slide because we heard about the resources, except from the commercial fish grounds. No one mentioned the commercial fish grounds so far. There's a high interest in that. And actually, there are disputes within the European Union about the fish grounds. So Spanish trawlers, Portuguese, German, Italian, they do fishing there, and they get into trouble with the Norwegian interests. And so this is a highly inner European Union conflict too. So the most interesting part about is the sailing routes then, because they concerning sovereign rights in the territory. This is as well as the Northwest as the Northeast Passage. And so societal security, environmental protection related questions are left. And if you put this all together, there's an interdependence between security and sovereignty. And you see, there is no real conflict about the territory. It's more about the jurisdictionally and sovereignty in this area. So this, I think, is a Norwegian quote from, I don't know who, so I didn't say who it was, but high north and so far low tension. So the land boundaries are agreed, most maritime boundaries are agreed, and it's full of symbolism and creating and using mythology, like the Russian flag on the ground, or the in the Losmonov Ridge, or the Danish flag on Hans Island. So there's no big dispute left, except maybe the new sea lines of communications, which have been mentioned before. Actually, the whole Arctic is regulated by the UNCLOS, United Nations Convention, United Nations Law of the Sea, and it's the challenge. The challenge is mostly the United States, because they didn't ratify the UNCLOS. So this is a dispute between Canada and the United States and Russia and the United States, and you can use the new sea lines for regulations, like you have to use an icebreaker or not. But so far the jurisdiction is clear. It's settled by the UNCLOS, and there's no doubt that they have to use it. Even this is not such a big troublemaker. The conflict management. The Arctic is one of the least traveled parts of the world. Nowadays, the focus is definitely somewhere else on security issues. It's not the Arctic. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea is ruling there, and there is the Arctic Council. But the Arctic Council is not mandated to deal with issues of security and defense, so only ad hoc structures include Russia. And there have been suggestions to use the NATO as one of the vehicles to deal with the security and defense issues. 4 of the 5 Arctic coast states are NATO members. From my point of view, the NATO should not be the institution to deal with security issues in NATO. So there's a lack of security institution in the Arctic. And I don't know if you, because I'm working for the Ministry of Defense, I always read the defense news and who is buying what and constructing what. And there's so they call it the arms race in the Arctic. But is there arms race in the Arctic? I've got 3 more minutes left, so to make it short, the United States have been, and they are doing, and they will always do under-ice operations as long there is ice. They have the missile defense structure, also located in the Arctic, and they have a plan for a new Coast Guard icebreaker, but they focus on the challenges to societal security. Canada is emphasizing stretching out the importance of the Arctic, but modest commitments have been to Arctic-specific investment in security or defense terms, national security terms. Denmark and Greenland, also limited emphasis on military presence in investment in the Arctic. Norway and Russia. Norway just mentioned the Arctic as the most highly prioritized area in the years to come. They create an Arctic reaction force, which is not like is more like a concentration of existing forces. It's nothing new, just like a new organization of forces in general. Russia, the Arctic is one of the most important economic and is important in economic and military terms. The fossil and mineral resources make it crucial to the economy. That's what they say. And it's the base of the early warning and staging area for strategic bombers. And it's a home to the key part of its strategic nuclear arsenal, the Northern Fleet. But they also invest in their ability to ensure the safety of human activity and jurisdiction, because the human activity will increase. And as I said before, with the sea lines of communications, the jurisdiction is challenged, or might be challenged. To see, let me just, when I'm rush, if you see this, the arms race in the Arctic or not, we may ask the counterfactual question, all the other things being equal, if the Arctic climate was not changing and the ice cap was not diminishing, would Russia and the United States still have built up their strategic assets in the Arctic? Probably yes. The Northern Fleet would still have been the main Russian fleet because it's a warm port, like an ice-free port. And it has to be modernized. There's a structural lack of modernization in the Russian fleet. And so it would be modernized anyway. And the United States still have invested in missile defense systems in the Arctic. Also, Norway would be the same. Probably yes, because if you have to identify a field of national defense and security terms, and you are Norway, so where do you look? In the south, in the west, in the east, there's no threat, so you look to the north. This is just military bases in the Arctic. I skipped that one. Conclusion, to make it short, nearly every actor foresees a need to increase security capabilities, but not only national security or defense structures. Mostly it's societal, environmental security. The role of institutions in mitigating disputes is not to be underestimated. The main characteristic so far is cooperation and stability. That's a common interest. And the region does not provide the most likely conflict scenario. But rather the Arctic as a theater and a wider geopolitical frame, arena for military power plays. So if there is a clash or a conflict between the great powers, of course it can also infect the Arctic or the structure in the Arctic. Societal security might become the key security problem. We just listened to it before, and there is a need for creation of a formal security institution. And that's my last point on the slide. Actually gets back to Anthony, where it says maybe if you talk about decarbonization, and if you are not able to drill there because makes no sense, it could minimize the potential conflicts and gives a chance for more and closer cooperation. So this was a rush in 9 minutes and 56 seconds. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Torben. I'd like to invite the panelists up for a very quick round.